and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and this is Ashley you once again, and I'm here to review all of the games that happened this week in European competitions, and then in a later video I'll be looking ahead to the next week's last 16 ties in the Champions League and in the Europa League as well. But as for now, I'll be reviewing the first four second legs of the last 16 in the Champions League and all the first legs of the last 16 of the Europa League in this video. So I hope you enjoy this video and look forward to seeing what I have to say about every tie that was played this week. So first up, on Tuesday night, it was the Champions League round of 16 second legs. First up, it finished Dortmund 2, Sevilla 2, which means that Dortmund are through to the quarterfinals on 5-4 on aggregate. It was an entertaining game. 2-2 was the least that Sevilla deserved from their performance. They were the better side in the second leg, but unfortunately they couldn't turn the tie around, and Dortmund, well, they'll feel slightly fortunate to have got through this one, because Sevilla had most of the play but couldn't take their chances, and when you come up against a side who's got one of the most lethal strikers in world football, then if you don't take your chances, then you're most likely going to get punished, and that's what happened to Sevilla tonight. That night, Dortmund extended their lead on aggregate through Haaland after he tapped into an empty net following a ball in from Marco Reus, and then early in the second half he thought he doubled Dortmund's lead with a finish with the outside of his right boot into the top corner, but following consultation with VAR, they decided to disallow the goal because of the fact that in an earlier phase of play he was fouled by Jules Koundé, I think it was, and they decided to give a penalty instead of awarding him the goal, which was a bit strange for me, but nevertheless Haaland stepped up to take the penalty. His first one was saved actually by the keeper of Sevilla, who following replays from VAR actually stood off his line whilst saving the penalty, so that's why it got retaken. And Haaland went for the same corner with the second one, but this time it ended up in the back of the net, and at 2-0 you thought it was pretty much tie done, but to their credit, Sevilla kept fighting and made a game of it with 20 minutes left or so with a penalty of their own. After a foul by Emre Can in the area, silly foul from him, to be honest with you. And then right in the last minute, it was scored by En-Nesyri, that penalty, and then right in the last minute, En-Nesyri got his second of the game to salvage a draw for Sevilla right at the end. Corner was thrown. They took a short corner, the cross came in, and En-Nesyri powered a header into the back of the net, but they couldn't find another one, and that meant that Dortmund were through to the last eight for the first time in 4 years, I think it is. So it's a good night's work for them, but as we saw over the two legs, they still need to improve defensively if they want to make any further progress in this competition. They'll still believe they can go all the way, Dortmund, but let's be honest, even with their talisman up top in Haaland, their defence is eventually going to let them down. We've seen it in the Bundesliga time and time again. Their defence has left a lot to be desired sometimes, and that's why they're outside of the top four and trying to push themselves into it. It's not been a great season by their standards, but Dortmund, but given how well they've performed recently, then they'll still be optimistic of having a good season. They're still in the German Cup, they've reached the semi-finals, and they've now got to the last stage of the Champions League, and they could still make the top four in the Bundesliga, so could still turn out well for them. But as for Sevilla, Their focus is now trying to maintain their position in the top four. They're out of the Copa del Rey and out of the Champions League, and yes, only La Liga to play for them. But disappointment for them. They felt that this was a tie that they could have got through against Dortmund, but it wasn't to be, and now they focus themselves on domestic matters. And moving on to the second tie of Tuesday night, it was Juventus against Porto. Juventus won the second leg 3-2, but went out on away goals after a 4-4 draw in aggregate, which was a huge shock given that Juve were heavy favourites to progress from this tie against their Portuguese counterparts. But like last season against Lyon, where it was another favourable draw, they couldn't get the job done, and questions will remain about whether Cristiano Ronaldo will still be at the club in their quest to win that elusive Champions League title, or even Andrea Pirlo, even though it's in his first season at the club. But the experiment hasn't really worked for the club, given their lagging behind in Serie A as they're trying to win their 10th league title in a row, but it hasn't really worked out for them. And this exit from the Champions League is a real big blow for the club. But let's be honest, Porto deserved to go through. They held the 2-1 advantage from the first leg and started off much the better side. They extended their lead through Oliveira from the penalty spot after a rash foul in the area by Demiral, I think it was. But as expected, Juve grew into the game as it wore on, and equalised early in the second half from Federico Chiesa, and then Chiesa scored again from a header after a cross by Cuadrado, and 2-1. You thought that Juventus were just going to go on and win the tie quite comfortably, especially given the fact that Porto went down to 10 men after Taremi was sent off for needlessly kicking the ball away. And you felt at that point that Juventus were just going to go on and win the tie quite comfortably, but to their credit, Porto stuck to their task and managed to take the tie to extra time, and then held on for a further 25 minutes before they got a set piece opportunity. Sergio Oliveira scored his second goal of the game with fired a free kick through the wall, which was weak, and passed Szczesny in the Juventus goal, and that second away goal in the end proved crucial, given that the Italian side then scored a third few minutes later through Rabiot following a corner, and they needed another one in the last few minutes but couldn't get it, and as a result, Juve once again exit the Champions League against a side that they should have beaten on paper quite easily. It's a magnificent result for Porto. I know they'll still not be expected to go much further than this, but if they keep performing like that, then maybe they could pull off another shock in the next round or two. But as for Juventus, a big disappointment for them, and they now have to focus on domestic matters in Serie A. And then moving on to Wednesday night, Liverpool hosted Leipzig. I say host, but the tie was not actually at Anfield. The second leg was actually in the same venue where they played the first leg, in Budapest. Leipzig needed to turn the tie around, but let's be honest, they weren't at the races on Wednesday night. Even though they needed to force the issue, they just didn't look like they could believe they could get themselves back into this tie, and Liverpool could have added to their advantage in the first half, but missed a whole host of chances, especially through Salah, who eventually scored on 70 minutes to pretty much put the tie beyond doubt. I think he twisted and turned Upamecano inside out, and then slotted it into the bottom corner, and then just as in the first leg, they scored a second in quick succession through Sadio Mane, following a cross from Divock Origi that the Senegalese stabbed into the back of the net, and that was pretty much game done. 4-0 on aggregate. Wow, I'm sure Liverpool would have been slight favourites to progress, but given their form in the Premier League, where they're just losing game after game, then I just couldn't really think that they would win that quite convincingly and even keep a clean sheet in both legs as well. So it's a big disappointment for RB Leipzig. I expected more from them over the two legs, but in truth they were outclassed in both ties, and they now focus on trying to catch Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga as well. As for Liverpool, well, they're out of the title race pretty much. That was done quite a long time ago. They're out of the FA Cup, out of the League Cup, and so their chance of a trophy this season is through the Champions League. Especially now they're slipping out of the race to finish in the top four of the Premier League as well. So the Champions League, do they put all their eggs in this basket to try and get themselves back into next season's competition? I mean, given the fact they've had so many injuries to key players, particularly in defence, it looks very unlikely that they'll go all the way. But this is Liverpool, you know. You shouldn't write them off even when they're at their weakest. And could it be the same as in 2005, where they also missed out on a place in the top four but still won the Champions League? You never know. So maybe they still have a chance of salvaging their season, but given the odds of who will win the trophy, win this season's competition, then it looks very unlikely for them. Well, job well done for Klopp and his men in this tie against Leipzig. And then the second tie on Wednesday night, it was PSG against Barcelona. Tie was pretty much done after the first leg. PSG were 4-1 up away following the away leg at the Nou Camp, and but they didn't start this second leg very well. Barcelona went right at them from the very start, created a whole host of chances that, had they converted, then it would have been a much more uncomfortable night for PSG. But as it was, the French side got themselves in front through Mbappe from the penalty spot. Was it a penalty? If you look at the replays, then contact was made on the foot of Icardi, but it was quite minimal, to be honest. So a bit soft that, but Barcelona did equalise a few minutes later for a brilliant strike from Messi from about 25 yards it was, into the top corner past Navas, and even though they still needed 3 goals, they could still believe that they could turn the tie around and do what they did to PSG in 2017, where they were 4-0 down after the first leg but still came back to go through with a 6-1 win at the Nou Camp. And it could have happened had they converted the penalty that they were awarded on the stroke of half time. I think there was a foul on Griezmann in the box, and Messi stepped up to take the penalty, but it was saved by Keylor Navas. If in truth it should have been retaken, if you look at replays, Verratti encroached before Messi took the penalty and then ended up clearing it after Navas had saved it. So, contentious decision, and that missed penalty effectively took the belief out of Barcelona. They didn't look the same in the second half. They ran out of steam, ran out of intensity, and PSG saw the game out quite comfortably. 5-2 aggregate wins might sound impressive from their point of view, but let's be honest, this is not the Barcelona side of old, and they were quite fortunate really to have won by such a comfortable margin given how poor they were in that first half. So if they have realised their dream of eventually winning the Champions League, PSG, then they really need to perform better than they did in that first half if they're to have a chance. But they'll be there or thereabouts, the Parisians. They reached the final last season and they'll hope to go one better this time. But as I said, they really need to improve if they're to win this season's competition. And then moving on to Thursday night in the Europa League, it was the first legs of the last 16 ties. 4 ties in the early kickoffs took place in the early kickoffs. One of them was Manchester United against AC Milan, a real standout tie between 2 former European champions, and many people thought that United would get through given their superior European pedigree of late, but as it turned out, Milan were much the better side. I thought they played the first half very well. Could have been 2 goals up if were it not for the ref to disallow those goals. Kessie's one was a brilliant volley, but unfortunately it struck his arm, and United rode their luck in the first half. But even so, they could have been ahead at the interval and should have been when Harry Maguire missed from a yard out. And even though they did grow into the game after that, United was still not playing at their very best. But they did get a goal early in the second half through their signing in January, Ahmad Diallo, with a clever back header, should you say, after a ball by Bruno Fernandes into his path over the keeper. And 1-0, you thought at that point that United were just going to go on and score 2 or 3, but to their credit, Milan stuck to their task, kept themselves in the game, and deserved their equaliser right at the end through Simon Kjaer, who headed in from a corner. Questions about the goalkeeper, Dean Henderson, whether he should have saved it or not. I think he should, but that's no less than Milan deserved, really, from the game. And they now have an away goal to take back to the San Siro next week, which means that United will have to score if they're to get themselves through to the quarterfinals. They'll feel confident, Solskjaer's side, given their strong away record in the Premier League, but they'll need to play a lot better than they did in the first leg if they're to get themselves through. And then in another of the early ties, finished Dinamo Kiev 0, Villarreal 2. Villarreal were pretty much the better of the two sides throughout the game, and they scored their goals in either half through Pau Torres, I think it was, in the first half, and Raul Albiol in the second half as well. And they now look to have 1 foot in the quarterfinals as well. So a good night for Unai Emery, who's now their manager. And they took a big step towards the last state of the Europa League, in a competition that Emery knows quite well of winning, having won it 3 times with Sevilla, and also got Arsenal to the final of this competition a few years ago. So he knows about winning this one, and his side have taken a giant step towards the latter stages of the competition. And then in another of the early ties, it finished Ajax 3, Young Boys 0. Pretty one-sided this game, I thought. Young Boys only had 1 shot throughout the whole game, which for a side at this stage of the competition, simply not good enough. And Ajax made them pay for their lack of ambition. They were much the better side, the Dutch, and but they didn't take until the 62nd minute, I think it was, for them to open the scoring. Davy Klaassen with a volley into the top corner, and then in the latter stages they pretty much ran away with the game and the tie, you would think. Dusan Tadic with the second, and then Brian Brobby with the third in injury time, and 3-0. Young Boys might think, oh well, in the second leg we can pull this back, but with no away goal it looks like a tall order for them, to be honest. And Ajax have 1 foot in the quarterfinals of the Europa League, and then in the final tie of the early kickoffs it finished Slavia Prague 1, Rangers 1. Good result for Rangers. Well, they'll have to finish the job next week to make sure this result counts for something, because as we saw in the last round, Slavia Prague, even though they drew the first leg at home, they managed to still progress. So still work to do for Rangers, but the fact they've got an away goal means they've got a slight edge in this tie over their Czech counterparts, who took an early lead and were the better side early on through a brilliant shot into the bottom corner from Nikolai Stanciu, it was. But Rangers, who, even though they offered little in the first half, they came back on level terms just before half-time through an unlikely source. Philip Helander tapping in after a free kick was pulled back by Ianis Hadji, and 1-1. That was the game. That was how the game ended. But not before a brilliant save by Alan McGregor in the Rangers goal at the 90th minute to preserve their draw, and Rangers will feel that they can get the job done back at Ibrox next week. But as we saw in the last round, Slavia Prague know how to find their way through these ties, even when they don't pick up such a promising result in the first leg. So still all to play for, but Steven Gerrard and his team will feel that they can get the job done next week. And then on to the later kickoffs. One Olympiacos hosted Arsenal, a rematch of their last 32 tie from last season, which the Greek side surprisingly won. But this time Arsenal took charge with a 3-1 win in Piraeus and were much the better side actually. I was very disappointed by Olympiacos. I expected more from them. But Arsenal were much the better side much the better side on the night, and they have looked to have 1 foot in the last 8. One of their signings in the January window, Martin Odegaard, opened the scoring with a long-range drive, which you could say the keeper should have saved, given it was down the centre of his goal. And then, but Arsenal conceded an equaliser by contriving to shoot themselves in the foot. Bernd Leno played a pass to, I think it was Ceballos, who, instead of kicking it out into row Z, he played it to, I think it was El Arabi, and with Leno retreating, he managed to fire the ball around him and into the back of the net. And 1-1, you felt that it was going to be the same old story for Arsenal with that kind of mistake, but they rallied towards the latter stages of the second half and got themselves 2 crucial late goals through Gabriel, who towered above the centre-back to head the ball past the goalkeeper, and then El Neni with the third, a long-range drive into the bottom corner past the keeper as well. And 3 away goals. Arsenal looked to be in the driving seat to make it through to the quarter-finals, but Olympiacos will still feel they'll be confident of turning this result around at the Emirates, given they did it last season as well. But they'll now need to score 3 goals to do so, and I don't think they will actually. They don't have enough in attack to be able to worry the Arsenal backline, even though the Gunners have been vulnerable defensively. I still don't think they'll turn this around, and it looks as though Arsenal will be through to the last state of the UEFA Europa League. And their North London rivals Tottenham won 2-0 against Croatian side Dinamo Zagreb to also put 1 foot into the last state of the competition as well. They scored in either half through Harry Kane. The first after, I think it was Lamella's shot came back off the post and it fell perfectly for Kane to tap in the rebound. And then the second half, after a mistake by one of the Dinamo defenders, he fired the ball past the keeper. And 2-0, they could have had more if Bale free kick had dipped in instead of being saved and he taps in at the back post. But as it is, 2-0 is a decent scoreline for Spurs, especially with the fact they've not conceded an away goal. And that pretty much puts them in a strong position to make it through to the last 8. And then another one of the standout ties, you would say, is Roma against Shakhtar Donetsk. 2 teams who were used to regularly compete in the Champions League, but have now dropped off slightly, and are both in the Europa League. And I thought this tie would be very evenly matched between the 2 teams, given the quality of players on show in both sides. But as it was, Roma were very convincing winners. 3-0 on the night. 3-0 on the night to pretty much book a place in the last 8. I know 3-0 leads have been overturned before, but it looks very difficult for Shakhtar from this position, let's be honest. And Roma, they were very good on the night. They opened scoring in the first half through Pellegrini, and then in the second half they doubled their lead through Mayoral, I think it was, and added a third through Mancini. And 3-0 looks as though there's no way back for Shakhtar from this, and Roma will be through to the quarter-finals, barring a catastrophe in Ukraine in the next week. So that was a very good result for them, especially with the fact they conceded no away goal. And then the final tie of the last 16 was a tie between two sides who weren't expected to get this far in the competition but are now both there. Granada against Molde, and it is Granada who have the advantage after the first leg with a 2-0 win. Spanish side were much the better of the two teams overall. Opened the scoring in the first half after a finish by, I think it was Yangel Herrera, I think it was, and then Roberto Soldado doubled their lead in the second half with a brilliant volley past the keeper, who maybe should have saved it at his near post. And Molde also had a man sent off as well, Martin Ellingson, I think his name was, who got himself sent off for a two-footed challenge. And with no away goal, it looks a difficult task for Molde to try to pull this tie back at their own stadium in Norway. So Granada also look to have one foot in the last 8 of the UEFA Europa League in their first ever season in Europe, which would be a really good achievement for them. And so that's the end of my review for all of this week's European ties that took place. Some teams look to have, there are 4 teams that are already through to the last state of the Champions League, and some teams are already look like they're already heading through to the last state of the Europa League as well. And we'll find out the identity of the 4 remaining Champions League quarter-finalists and the 8 Europa League quarter-finalists by the end of next week as well. So it's getting very close towards the business end of both competitions. Some big teams are still going to be left in both competitions, and it'll be interesting to see who lasts the distance and celebrates glory at the end of May. So I hope you enjoy watching this video as always. Hope you enjoy watching what I have to say about these European games, and I look forward to producing more content, if not better, of this nature in my next few videos as always. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you all soon once again. I'm out of it.